These are statistics that when I first heard them made my brain literally be that brain exploding emoji because I realized that only 12% are breaking six figures. Only 7% are making 250,000 or more, and only 3% are scaling past a million. And this is really sad when you consider that women are starting businesses faster than ever before. In fact, the fastest growing demographic of small businesses is Black owned businesses owned by women, but they do not represent the revenue growth. We have 44% of small businesses run by women, and they represent only 4% of total small business revenue. Clearly, I am a statistics nerd, but this is why I am on this mission to end entrepreneurial poverty for women entrepreneurs.
Well, hey, friend, and welcome back to the Driven Woman Entrepreneur Podcast. If you've ever wondered why such a tiny percentage of female entrepreneurs actually break the six-figure mark, why so many of us overinvest in the wrong things at the wrong time and hold ourselves back, what all the hype versus the reality is about value-based pricing, what you need to charge to be profitable, and so much more, you're going to want to buckle up and sit tight. My guest today is Racheal Cook, host of the Promote Yourself to CEO podcast and founder of the CEO Collective. And I guarantee you what you are about to hear is going to completely change the way you think about your potential for success as a female business owner. Let's get right to the interview. So, Racheal, several years ago, I heard from our mutual friend, Tara Newman, a shocking statistic that 82% of female entrepreneurs are not breaking six figures gross in their business, in spite of all of the noise that we hear online about 6 weeks to six figures, 6 months to six figures, seven figures, and so on. Clearly, there is a big disconnect between the hype and the reality. So, let's dig into this.
Absolutely. These are statistics that when I first heard them made my brain literally be that brain exploding emoji because I realized that only 12% are breaking six figures. Only 7% are making 250,000 or more, and only 3% are scaling past a million. And this is really sad when you consider that women are starting businesses faster than ever before. In fact, the fastest growing demographic of small businesses is Black owned businesses owned by women, but they do not represent the revenue growth. We have 44% of small businesses run by women, and they represent only 4% of total small business revenue. Clearly, I am a statistics nerd, but this is why I am on this mission to end entrepreneurial poverty for women entrepreneurs, because I know that most women entrepreneurs like myself started their business because they wanted more freedom and more flexibility. They wanted the opportunity to have that work-life balance, to juggle raising a family or taking care of aging parents. And that's really hard in a traditional work environment where you're given maybe 2 weeks of paid vacation a year. The reality of life isn't compatible often for a lot of women in that professional environment. We need more flexibility. So for me, the biggest thing I'm out here trying to help more women entrepreneurs do is cross that multiple six-figure mark on the way to seven figures, because honestly, $100,000 sounds like a great number, but I think everyone has felt the pinch of the last few years. It's no longer what it was. It's not enough to really pay yourself a great salary by the time you consider taxes and any expenses that you have. Even $250,000 is kind of enough to pay yourself a decent salary and have a few people on your team to support you, but they're not full-time. This is still a very, very small business, but at least you're not in it by yourself. But this is why so many women start businesses hoping for freedom and flexibility, and then they kind of burn out because there's this misconnection here about what it actually takes and what goals you should be setting in order to have that sustainability to create the freedom and flexibility you're looking for.
This is so, so important. And I'm finding we have so many mutual frustrations about the industry that is producing female entrepreneurs who are not set up for success. They don't know what metrics are important. They don't know how to prioritize things. I mean, they're going and paying for very expensive websites and branding when they don't even know what their offer is or how to find or get paid by a first client. So I think a lot of women, for me, in my observation and experience, a lot of women come to entrepreneurship really grossly underprepared and
Yes.
with really inaccurate expectations through no fault of their own. And if you add to that the fact that many women may choose to enter entrepreneurship kind of willingly and voluntarily, many get pushed into it because they have a chronic illness and can't work full time,
Mhm.
because they've been laid off, because they are in an unstable industry, because they have a special needs child, because they have aging parents, because
Yep.
their spouse relocates for a job, they can't find one, ageism, sexism, I don't need to go on. There's so many reasons why women who never would have chosen entrepreneurship, who don't actually identify with or see themselves as entrepreneurial, are starting businesses because they have no other freaking choice.
Exactly. And I think this is where a lot of the hype out there, I mean, it is hype.
It
It's
is.
there's so much BS out there aimed at early stage business owners right now. And that's particularly frustrating to me because I feel like anyone who's brand new to small business, 20 years ago, pre all the social media, pre, blogs and YouTubes and all of that, I worked in the SBA and the SBTDC Center.
Mm,
And if somebody wanted to come and start a small business, that was their main place to go, was to their SBA, was to recognized places to get support. And we would tell them it's going to take 3 to 5 years for most small businesses to break even. And now there's all this hype that's the complete opposite. That's like, you can get to six figures in 6 minutes if you just follow my proven formula.
yes.
And then what really makes me honestly want to explode is that so many of the biggest names in the entrepreneurship and small business space, the ones that dominate on social, the ones that have the biggest podcasts or YouTube shows, for the more advanced entrepreneurs, they're watching them and realizing that now they're not even just targeting people who want to be entrepreneurs, who are just getting in the startup stages trying to figure stuff out. They're now targeting people who want a side hustle, who are still employed and giving the promises of all you need is a funnel. You're one funnel away, right? Or you just need a course. Having a course is going to give you so much freedom. And I'm here to share with most people that is not the reality. Most people, that is not the reality at all. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the best ways to get started and think about starting a business is to really get clear on what problem you are solving and figure out how you can solve that problem for people instead of building out some really, really complicated, time consuming course or funnel or any of that. My clients who have always been the most successful have been the ones that have taken their experience and expertise from their career
Yes.
and transitioned into running their own business. And that is a huge step up because they already know how to do the thing exceptionally
Mm-hmm.
well. They're not starting a business and saying, well, I've never done this before, but I heard this is how I can make money, and then trying to figure out marketing and sales and how to do the thing that you're saying you're going to do halfway decently.
Yeah. No, that's it's actually ludicrous when you think about it. And it's like, but yet so many of us fall for it. And I'll tell you, here's personal confession time, Racheal. Even though I was a highly educated, credentialed, experienced psychotherapist with a very successful cash pay private practice, when I decided to pivot into coaching, because I just wanted to help people in a different way, what I often say is I
Mm-hmm.
decided to shift the conversations I was having from problems to possibilities. And I'm much more directive than most therapists. So I realized, yeah, I'm really more of a coach. And I was leaving the state, and my license would expire the minute I crossed the state line for all those reasons. But for some reason, and this is so perverse to me, and I'd be curious what your thoughts are on it. I, like many, thought, well, I'm not going to be a therapist anymore. I'm going to be a coach. I'm going to do this different thing. And while it's still helping people in a similar way, it's different. And I'm going to go from working face to face to working online. It was as though my brain decided I am completely unqualified. I have no idea what I'm doing. I literally cannot find my ass with both hands in a rearview mirror. So I need to go find somebody to teach me how to be an online coach. That was a hideous mistake that cost me many thousands of dollars and a couple of years of my life, because I found myself in a coaching cult, and I realized many of them are very culty.
Oh, yeah.
And it really kind of separated me from the confidence I had in knowing how to do what I already had a private practice. It's not like I went from working in an agency or a hospital to starting my own business. I had already started and was already running a successful business. I wonder if you have any thoughts, because I know you work with a lot of women as well. Like, why
Oh my
did I just
gosh.
suddenly like wipe the screen?
I have
Like, I know nothing. I need to start from scratch. Please tell me what to do.
no, I absolutely would have to say this is so common, especially with so many of the women that I work with. I When I shifted my brand into Racheal Cook and have MBA at the, in my signature now,
Yeah.
suddenly I was seeing all these women who had so many advanced degrees show up in my world, and they all still struggle with the exact same thing. It's like we are needing that confirmation so much that it's okay for us to do what we're doing and that we have the
Mm,
credentials and we've done all the things. But here's the challenge, like you just hit on it so perfectly. When you got all of your advanced degrees in psychotherapy, that's highly, overseen, credentialed, like that is a really tough program. I doubt you just wrote a check and then it didn't really matter how you showed up to that program. You got that certification or degree,
mm.
right?
Yeah, no.
But the reality is, a lot of the credentialing online, there's no oversight, there's no overseeing body, there's no code of ethics. For most of these programs, they're not actually checking that these people that now are using this trademark, they're essentially just licensing the trademark, right? They're not actually credentialing people. It's just another revenue stream for them. They don't have a way that they're checking quality control. They don't have a way that they're checking that these people actually know what they're doing. But somebody who's coming from a clinical background, you had to go through so much,
Hmm.
right? And so I think it's really easy to feel like we have to go out there and get another credential. But I'm really hesitant about that. And I just launched for the first time our own certification program. But I literally took everything that was frustrating me about these certifications online and was like, you know what? I'm going to be super, super clear about what this is and what this isn't. I'm going to make sure they understand the material, and I would feel comfortable with them going working with my clients now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what's happening for most of these certification programs. You're spending usually multiple five figures, spending a lot of money, but there's no personal, making sure that you actually are
Yeah.
qualified to do this
It's
work.
unregulated, Rachel. There's no regulation.
Yeah.
Even though I know ICF really tries hard to present themselves as a regulatory body, they technically are not. And I think that knowing that you can
Yeah.
literally get away with doing whatever you want, you can be incompetent AF.
Yeah.
And if you have a big enough name, there's going to be no clapback, because people are afraid of retaliation, harassment, and also the loyal fans of these big name people coming for you. I think that's one of the reasons why we see so much entrepreneurial poverty among women, because this notion, we
Yeah.
go into entrepreneurship thinking that we don't know anything. Not true. We go into it thinking we need someone to tell us what to do and to lay out the path, because most of us are risk averse. We don't have
Yeah.
experience taking risks and failing and dusting off and trying again in the same way that men do. These are generalizations, but they've often proven to be true. We take it personally when we fail. We think it's a personal failing as opposed to a learning experience. Keep going. And we overinvest at the beginning, when really you could get by relatively well with a lot of DIY stuff as you're figuring out what your offer is, what you have to sell, how to price it, who your ideal client is. If you are 20, 30, 50, $100,000 in to investing in a business that doesn't even exist yet, it's going to be
Yeah.
so
No.
hard for you to reach break even. I wouldn't even say the 3-year mark is realistic at that point.
Yeah. And I think, again, this is something that marketing has hijacked common sense here in so many ways, because when I started, again, I had maybe $5,000 to start my business, and half of that went to buying a new laptop. And, and I really did the least amount upfront I needed before I got some paying clients. And because I had such a simplified approach and I wasn't looking outside everywhere at all the noise, and there really wasn't that much noise, let's be honest. In 2008, there were very few people talking.
Mm.
But I knew from my own experience in my career so far, if I can talk to somebody and I can say, hey, what problems are you having? I think I can help with these. Would you like to work together? I could get enough clients to at least get the ball rolling. And I didn't need to over invest in a lot.
Mm.
But that comes from having some experience and talking to people who had started businesses. And the vast majority of them said, just get out there and start talking to people and ask how you can help. Because they're going to tell you how you can help what they're struggling with. And if you can figure out a way to be like, okay, I can help you with that, you'll at least get the ball rolling.
But here's the rub. You
Yes.
have to get out. You have to get out of your house.
Yes.
You have to like put your face on, put some real pants on, and go talk to real people. And they will tell you. I have said many times, the fastest, easiest sales I have ever made is when I'm out in public and I'm talking to people. I often find that
Literally.
men are more quick to make decisions as well. And I think this is because of all the intersections of being conditioned as a female to be perfect, don't make mistakes, do it right the first time, think everything through, don't take risks. I mean, that is such bad advice for being an entrepreneur, and just getting out and talking to people and saying, one of the best clients I've had to date is we were both in a spinning class at the gym I used to belong to in LA. And we were kind of like egging each other on and competing with each other. Never met before. It was just dude sitting next to me on the bike. And afterwards we chatted a little bit about like, I like your vibe. I like your spirit. You really made this ride better for me. And I'm like, same. What do you do? And I said, I'm a coach for entrepreneurs. I think I need to hire you. And I'm like, could well be true. And literally 5 minutes later, we're exchanging information and he became a client. And I'm like, what is so different about this than everything that's happening for female entrepreneurs now,
Yeah.
and why it's so hard for them to make money and pay themselves and grow is that so many people are hiding behind their freaking computers, because that
Yes.
right there has been sold to us as flexibility and freedom. No, baby. No, baby. That's a ball and chain.
Literally. I could not agree with this more. I think the promise of all you have to do is social media and create content and have your 47-step funnel and all this stuff, it is all promised as freedom. But then you get into it and you're like, oh my gosh, I am sitting here trying to come up with another social media post. I've got 8 more I've got to post today. I've had the same exact thing happen. I am out living my life. I'm at the neighborhood pool with my family, and another family comes up and we start talking, and I'm working with them. I've had this happen going to my chiropractor, who's become the longest term client I've had continually. She's worked with me for like 4 straight years now. And it's because I was just myself. And, asking people what they do or what's going on with them is such a normal human thing. But instead, we feel like we have to go online where we may not know anybody. It actually makes it harder. I think one of the fastest ways to build a business is to pay attention to the people around you. You probably have at least 100 people in your network, but if you start just making it a habit to talk to people kind of everywhere you go, you'll be amazed at who knows who and who can introduce you to who. It can take off really, really quickly, but you've got to be willing to be human and show up and have real conversations and start building those real relationships.
And this is true whether you identify as an introvert or an extrovert. You got to leave your house sometime. Yep. You got to have a conversation with somebody. You do not have to overburden yourself with this idea of the elevator pitch and all this. Like, no. People helping people is as old as, the cave days. Like, we can't do everything on our own. You know something that somebody needs to know. And if the person you're talking to doesn't need it, they know someone who does. I'm curious what your thoughts are about. I understand we were locked up for a couple of years. And during that time, a lot of people, like even hardcore extroverts like me, became much more comfortable being alone.
Yeah.
After the first few months, when I realized, oh, I kept thinking, oh, this will be over in 6 weeks. Then I thought it'll be over in 6 months. And then I'm like, well, fuck me. This isn't going away anytime soon. I adjusted. I adapted. I'm highly
Yeah.
resilient and highly adaptable. And I'm so grateful for that. But I just find so many people who, even the extroverts, are like, oh, I can't do that. Yes, you can. A lot of people are convinced that they're introverts, or they are calling themselves introverts because they think that gives them an out. And most women will tell me, and I know you've heard this 1,000 times, is that I can't do that until I have the confidence to do that. So what do? When they think they're lacking confidence,
Oh, Lord.
they get another certification, they take another course, they go into another group.
Yeah.
Like, I got news for you.
No.
None of that is going to build your confidence. What actually builds your confidence is getting in front of somebody and making them an offer and having them say yes and hitting the buy now button. That is what builds your confidence. No amount of certifications, no amount of courses, no amount of
Exactly.
Facebook groups, hanging out with other people who don't know what they're doing. None of that's going to move the needle. Why is it so hard for people to understand that and be willing to act on it?
Well, I think a huge part of this is a lot of us, as we get, older, I think we forget how to connect with people in just an authentic and real way. We lose that. In fact, my friend Shannon Siriano, who owns Rebel, had an event once that was how to make friends. It was the most packed workshop full of women in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who were like, how do I make friends? I literally don't know. And so I think this is a part of it. I think also this was part of the unlearning I had to do very early on.
Mm,
I'm very highly sensitive. I have a lot of neurodivergent situations happening. I get sensory overload. I'm very sensitive to like sound and lights, and I get very overwhelmed if there's like too much
yeah.
happening around me. And I'm so introverted, and people are often surprised because once we get in a conversation, they're like, what do you mean you're introverted?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, if I have to go to a conference where there's hundreds of people and there's the DJ going and there's commotion happening everywhere and I can't even make my way through the room, I am going to have to go lay on the hotel room floor
Mm,
in order to recover. But if I walk into a room of a bunch of women who I know probably a third of them because they're all part of this community that I'm also a part of, and that is a comfort level, it's quieter, it's a little more intimate, I am happy. I am
mm-hmm.
absolutely able to go and talk to every single person in that room. So I think the first thing is know your energy, but also know like what does the ideal situation look like for you for meeting people.
Yep.
Because if you're like me and going to packed events, going to things that are very loud or chaotic, or where you're scheduled within, every single 5-minute block, I hate events like that. And so I do not go to them, period. Like I just realized I tried to do that for a very long time. And I would come home and it would take me 3 days to recover. I was just so overstimulated.
Mm,
But when I have these smaller events, I feel totally comfortable. So part of my strategy has always been I go to at least one event a month. And I'm a systems girl. I can't help it.
yeah.
I'm like, my goal is to have one event a month and meet two people for coffee or lunch or something a month. And that is my going out
In
into the
person.
world
In person.
in person. And it has helped me so much because one, it
Mm,
also gives me boundaries to make sure I'm not over scheduling myself,
yeah.
which can also happen, which can
Yep.
also burn people out because they feel like there's something every single week. But if you're like, you know what, I'm going to focus on, I'm more introverted, smaller groups, smaller events, you can probably find something that's going on. If it's not local to you, there's still smaller events that you can go to virtually or just travel. I mean, I've definitely traveled to DC or to New York or to Atlanta, all within a few hours of me either
Mm,
way, in order to attend a more intimate event because I knew it kind of fit the criteria where I know I can be myself the most. And I think that freedom is huge because it means I don't have to worry about those big things anymore. It's not
mm.
even on the list anymore.
Hey, it's Diane with a quick interruption. If this conversation with Racheal Cook about simplifying and streamlining your business to increase profits and freedom at the same time has got you thinking, this is exactly what I want, why not consider joining me for a summer strategy session? You can choose between a power hour, a strategy day, or a 4-week intensive, depending on your needs and goals. Spots are limited and they're only available during July and August. You can click on the link in the show notes to find out more and book a free, no obligation consultation. Let's get right back to my conversation with Racheal Cook. There's so much wisdom here, Racheal, and I want to unpack it so our listeners don't miss a single thing. We've been talking a little bit about how women overburden themselves when they're getting started by overinvesting in their business before their business really requires that of them. It may never require it of them, certainly when it's not making any money, and what it actually takes to have confidence and the necessity of getting out and talking to people and not hiding behind your computer. What else do you think makes it more difficult for women to become profitable in their business when they're just getting started? And then I want to move us along and talk about what makes it more difficult for them to be financially viable when they're a little bit more experienced.
The profitability side is pretty simple for me to explain because it's honestly not having your offers and your pricing sorted. Most women entrepreneurs who start price way too low.
Yes.
And they, instead of creating a clear offer, they usually just start out selling like 1 hour of their time at a time. And that is actually setting you up for so much stress. Like, let's say you were going to become a coach of any type of coach, whatever type of coach you could imagine. But let's say you decide, oh, I'm going to have $100 an hour per session.
Yeah.
Then you start selling those sessions and you're having to refill your calendar every single week with new people. There's no continuity for those clients. It's so hard to get those clients to sign up and recommit. And at the end of the day, you're not served because you're constantly hustling to fill the next week's calendar. And honestly, they're not served because if your business is in any way, shape, or form about helping people make a change, go through a behavioral change, go through some sort of personal transformation, learn a process, that's never going to happen in one session. That's like going to the gym with a personal trainer one time and then wondering why you're not doing like a bodybuilding competition.
No.
You've got to set yourself and your clients up for success by designing offerings that actually encourage people to go through the whole process with you and that help you lock in revenue you can count on more than an hour.
Yeah. And I also think there's another aspect to that that's really, really important. And that is this notion of like hourly pricing versus value pricing. Yeah. I mean, in truth, if you're on your way to the airport to go close a very important deal and you get a flat tire, what would it be worth to you to have somebody appear immediately, fix that tire, and you get to the airport on time versus you're trying to figure out who can I pay the least amount of money to? You have to wait, you miss your flight, you make a shitty impression, you don't close the deal. So I think the notion of value-based pricing, it steers you away from thinking about what you do by the hour because different people take different amounts of time to get to their goals. And if you're being compensated by the hour and they don't realize how long it's going to take, they're going to run out of money, or at least the money they allocated to solve this problem before you get there. So they are not served. You are not served. You're definitely not going to get repeat business. You will definitely not get a testimonial. You'll be lucky if you don't get a shitty Yelp review or, some other form of negative clapback because you're not actually helping people. And yet, so many people are encouraging the newbie entrepreneurs, the newbie female entrepreneurs to have these really low ticket offers to make it non-threatening for people to take the first step toward you. If people really realized, and of course they don't really talk about this, but how big an audience you have to be able to make even a tiny bit of money on a low ticket offer, I think far fewer people would think this is a viable way to go about it.
Absolutely. This is literally why I created the Get Paid calculator that I created. It's absolutely free on my website, y'all. Go to it, theceocollective.com/hello. There's a little resources page for you. This free calculator is designed because I kept seeing this disconnect. First of all, with revenue goals, not being able to fund your actual take-home income goals,
Thank you.
big issue. Then making sure your revenue goals also consider like, okay, by the time you put in taxes and paying yourself, what is your operation budget here? How much do you actually spend on operating the business? And then the final part of this calculator is the sales and audience calculator, where you can double check your offers, your pricing, how many clients are required in order to hit that revenue goal. And then it'll automatically populate for you on the bottom what audience size you need. And the reason I included the audience size was exactly what you're talking about. It's because I think a lot of people feel like, well, if I just put out this low price point, it's less threatening. And over time, I can take somebody from the $27 thing to $97 to the overtime takes forever. And now you have really, really complicated your business. If you really want to get out the gate and have great revenue coming in the door, really uncomplicated business that takes very little overhead to run, this is where looking at something I often find the sweet spot tends to be a package that's at least $2,500 at a minimum. And for most of my service-based businesses, that's where I try to steer them is if you can have at least $2,500 as your minimum package, however that's structured.
Mm-hmm.
I just happen to know that that number as a baseline starts to change the math. It starts to make the math work a lot better for so many people. And so once you get that clarity, you can start to realize, oh, I don't need to get in front of 1 million people because I don't actually need 100 clients this year. It makes your life so much simpler.
I love everything that you're saying, Racheal, about simplify, uncomplicate. Simplify, uncomplicate. For the people in the back, I'm going to say it one more time, simplify and uncomplicate, because what we're sold, as you said before, like the 47-step funnel, the proven process, you just need to do this,
Yep.
and then you do this, and you do this. What that's doing is keeping you dependent on the web celebs and the internet gurus so that you keep paying them because you need to keep learning things. I realize, all the mistakes that I made when I shifted from a very successful private practice to an online business was overcomplicating and not trusting myself. And I think if there's one thing I want everybody to hear, and I'm never going to stop talking about, is that you know so much more than you're giving yourself credit for. And when you outsource your self-esteem and competency to people that you don't even know, who are probably spending thousands of dollars a month on ads to keep getting in front of new people that they can dupe, you probably can figure this out in a very simple way. And for some reason, and I am neurodivergent as well, as you know, and I have a tendency to overcomplicate things by nature because I keep adding another shiny thing and another shiny thing and another shiny thing. And I'm like, ooh, I want to do this and I want to do this and I want to do this. And then it's like completely unmanageable and I have to burn it down and start over. Like, why is it so hard for us to adopt this notion that simple is best? I think sometimes it comes down to just a lack of self-trust and thinking if I don't feel confident, I'm not doing it right. No, if you don't feel confident, you're probably not really doing it. You're probably getting ready to do it. You're not getting out the gate yet. So like make it simple and get out there. I don't know how much more clear we can say it, but that's just, I think there's a lot of getting ready to get ready.
If people would remember that every message you're hearing out there, every marketing message that is hitting your screen, your inbox, billboards as you drive down the highway, whatever, you have to understand like there's a history and there's context and nuance along that. So think about Amazon. Amazon started in the end of the 90s, early 2000s. All they did was books for years and years and years and years. They had years of only doing books. And everybody was like, this isn't going to make any money. People aren't going to just buy books. Meanwhile, Jeff Bezos is building out the infrastructure for something that became what it is, right? And most of the businesses that we look at today that have, and I think this is one reason why people overcomplicate, because they look around and they're looking at people who are so much further ahead, who are years ahead. And what they're not seeing is that the reason Gary Vee can pump out content the way he does is he literally has 40 something people on his personal brand team. That's not including anyone who works at VaynerMedia.
Yeah.
Those are just the people responsible for his personal brand. And he's in a book launch right now. So I happen to hear him say, I have 44 people just doing that. And I'm sitting here going, you can't compare yourself to Gary Vee. Like, that is a massive team just to make him look like he's everywhere, right? And so we all have to remember that most of the people you're looking at now who have been doing something for 10 or 15 or 20 years, they did not start out with a super complicated anything. They did one thing and they rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat, and they did it again and again and again. Gary Vee did Wine Library for like, what, 5 or 6 years
Yeah.
before he really started writing books? Yep. And I think that's what we've all got to remember is you got to look backwards. You got to be, and I'm a nerd. I will research somebody. I will be like, where were they then? I will use the Wayback Machine on my computer and go, what did their website look like when they started? And it's hard to remember that. It's hard to remember that they started somewhere too. But the ones who've been here the longest, I always see that they picked one thing and they did it over and over and over and over again until it got to the point where it made sense to do another thing, to add another layer onto it. But they didn't start with all those layers. They started with one.
For sure. Now, what do you have to say to the people who are neurodivergent like us, who get bored easily, because we know that's true, who are like, that simple pared down business is going to bore the fuck out of me in no time flat? Like, what do you have to say about that?
So this is where I think you need to lean into your strengths and know yourself. A level of self-awareness is going to save your butt on this. Because if your business is designed in a way that you are always bored, yeah, you're going to look for the shiny object. Yeah. You're going to come up with new things. I have gotten so clear on what my strengths are. I'm obsessed with the Strengths Finder.
Me too.
And I absolutely love it. When I first found that, probably when it first came out, I mean, I've had the report for years and years, and I keep going back to it and I give it to my clients because I'm like, I know that when I can have conversations about ideas, I am in my happy place.
Same.
And that is one reason I set up my business the way it is, because I wanted to have great conversations with amazing, interesting people like we are right now. Yep. And this is what I do in my business. Like, my main role is to show up once a week for our group coaching calls or show up for my one-on-one calls. And it is so much fun. My brain is literally so happy right now that I know that if I were to check my Oura ring, it's going to tell me like I was in the zone. I was in recovery mode doing the things that we're doing right now.
Yeah.
And it's because I made sure that I know who I want to talk to, right? And I also made the decision in my business, I like the challenge of not having everybody doing the same thing. I actually love that my clients are across multiple industries. None of them are the same. We don't do cookie cutter. And it gives my brain that diversity that it needs to give it the opportunity to come up with solutions for multiple industries, multiple people, lots of different ideas. The frameworks are universal because they're universal for pretty much any business. But I like being able to look at the person and their business and their clients and say, ooh, I know how this would work for you. And it's going to be different than it would work for this other person, this other person. So I think knowing yourself and making sure that you are getting what you need out of your offers, like, you should be excited to talk to your clients. You should be excited to have an interview. If you're not, then maybe we need to do something differently. But for me, that's what it was.
Yeah. So
my brain loves a challenge.
Yeah, same. You have to know yourself, and you have to be willing to honor what you know about yourself, because it doesn't matter what works for somebody else. It may not work for you. And even if it's working for you, but it's not working for you, like you're making money, but you freaking hate it. You dread getting on your client calls. You dread making content. You dread it when you see you have a discovery call or a consultation, because that might end up being one more person you have to deal with. It's like, it's time to take a serious, like, stop and reconsider your strengths and what you most enjoy doing.
Absolutely. Like if you're someone who absolutely wants to be behind the scenes, don't talk to anybody, then look at done for you services where you really have minimal contact with somebody, because then you're just behind the scenes doing the emails or creating the website or whatever it is. But if you need some personal engagement and you like having I mean, it's so much fun for me. I can't even explain. If you like that,
Yeah.
then build that into it. I know some people who being mostly at home or by themselves, they really don't like. And
Mm.
so they tried shifting into a different model, but then they went back and they're like, you know what? I just really love having clients come to my office. And that's what I prefer. And I'm like, great. You need to know yourself and design your business accordingly. I think that's going to help avoid a lot of the feelings of this is boring, is just making sure it's all aligned. I think the final thing I'll add to this is I always give myself about 10% for experimenting. So there are
Mhm.
core things in my business that are so locked in, so rinse and repeat. We don't mess with that, right? Don't F with the system. The systems are working, keep running the systems. But if I get a little inkling, especially when I'm doing my research and I'm like, oh, this looks kind of cool, let me look into this. I'll look through it and decide, I'm going to take a little bit of time and experiment, and I'll make an experiment. I'll give myself parameters. So you asked me before we started recording about my TikTok journey.
Mm.
This is exactly what I did with that. I took a couple months. I was like following, learning, seeing how I might want to do it. And then I gave myself parameters. Here's my 6-month experiment.
Yeah.
Here's how I want to do it for me. Here's what the testing is going to look like. And I didn't even care if I got results out of it. It was just like a
Mm.
creative thing, but it gave me a container for it. And it also didn't disrupt any of the core systems that were already working in my business. It was an add-on. So it was an experiment of just 10% of my bandwidth. It did not take away from the core things that I knew were working in my business.
I'm going to make sure I highlight this when I promote this episode, Racheal, in addition to linking to all the calculators that you have for people, because if you are worried about getting bored, and a lot of people say the
Yeah.
building is the exciting, the launching, the building, the growing, that's super exciting for an ADHD brain. I totally get it. But you have to build things into your business model that give you that extra stimulation on the regular
Right.
without doing any damage to what you've already got. Because far too many people, when they get bored, they burn things down or they start to destruct it in some way, just to get the
Yeah.
dopamine. But I love the 10% allocation for experimentation because that's very stimulating. You can nerd out on, like, you're doing a research project and the outcome
Yeah.
does not matter. You're not attached to any particular outcome, so you can thoroughly enjoy it. No risk. Love, love.
Absolutely. And it's enough for you to see if it works for you. It's like trying it on,
Yeah.
right? You're going to try it on. You're going to see if this fits you. And if it doesn't, then no big deal. But the biggest part about it is you didn't burn everything down. You didn't shut down what works. You keep those things going
Yes.
so that your business can be as stable as possible while you're running your experiment.
Love, love, love it. And I think so many of the conversations that are happening around us need to shift, especially now, because there
Yeah.
is so much female entrepreneurial poverty. And I think some people are starting to become aware of it outside of this conversation, is that we need to stop investing in things as a source of stimulation. We need to stop trying new things as a source of stimulation. If it's not contributing to
Yep.
the bottom line, you got to get your dopamine somewhere else because you will destroy your business in the process. Now, besides doing that, which I think is one of the reasons why I find so many women, and I was really shocked to realize how much this happens. I bet you have a statistic, is how many women, I bet you do, how many women feel like they are succeeding in their business to some degree, but they are not paying themselves. I mean, this is like, this is where my head,
So
what, how
many,
does this happen?
so many.
How many?
Yeah, I don't have a specific stat on this, but I will say most businesses in general are not profitable.
Yep.
And this is another pet peeve of mine. The whole conversation just about revenue only and not about what you actually take home is very detrimental
Yeah.
to women out there everywhere,
Misleading.
because it leads to the belief that bigger is better.
Yeah.
But I honestly know many business owners who are at multiple 7 figures, 8 figures, who are not paying themselves that much at the end of the day. They're paying a ton to their team, but by the time they pay their team, by the time they pay all the affiliate commissions they owe everybody now, by the
Ad
time they pay their
spend.
massive
Yeah.
ad spends, by the time they pay for all the software and everything, they are lucky to be paying themselves a decent salary. I think there's very, very few exceptions to that. And I think the only reason that would even make sense to me is if you were literally planning to sell this business soon.
Yeah.
And even then, you want to show a higher profit because who wants to buy a business? It's not super profitable. But I do think for a lot of small business owners, like if we use some basic back of the napkin math and you only take home 50% of what you're making, which is what Mike Michalowicz says in his book, Profit First, that a healthy business that's making 250,000 or less should be able to pay the owner 50%, but 82% are making less than 100,000. So they're barely bringing home 50,000. We know most women entrepreneurs are really making less than 50,000. So basically, you could pay yourself more going to work at Starbucks, and they have benefits. So I'm like, where are we going here, everyone? Let's get real about this situation and start getting clear about how do we make it as profitable as possible. The most profitable businesses are the simplest businesses. Most profitable businesses are boring businesses, meaning they rinse and repeat over and over and over again. And the most profitable businesses, in my experience, are the ones that are very, very streamlined. They have minimal overhead. They have basically as small of a team as they can get away with having and getting the most out of that team. They're not adding extra expense just so that they can show off something. And I think this is our culture in general.
Yes.
This is our culture in general too, though, because most people think that if you're wealthy or you're a millionaire, you're out here driving fancy cars. I'm here to tell you, no, they're not. They're driving off paid off Toyotas that they run into the ground. Every multimillionaire I have grown up around, they are not flashy, they are not fancy. They are focused on profit, and they are not focused on showing you how fancy they are by declaring their revenue or their toys. They're focused on actually building real wealth.
I'm so glad you said that. So we've been laying the groundwork for people to forgive themselves for not being profitable,
Yep.
forgive themselves for not hitting the mythical, magical six figures, for all the things. But if they're still in the game and they still want to stay in the game and they are not looking for a job or wanting to call this a fail, like, I know you've got a solution and a series of strategies that people need to implement when they've reached the point where they're like, okay, you know what? I thought it was a great idea to build a business based on passion or purpose or both. I forgot the profit part, but I'm not ready to give up. I want to put another P in the equation. Racheal, what do I do to start working towards getting out of entrepreneurial poverty and actually having a profitable, sustainable business for the future?
Yes. Well, I'm going to share that I have a ton of resources on my website, including a series that is the path to predictable profits. And it kicks off with a how to get started and get clients ASAP, which is a pretty intensive article I wrote, breaking down some very simple steps you can take that will not cost you a penny. It's absolutely free on my website. And then that goes into what we call our business growth checklist, which includes all of the steps in the startup stage that you need to be thinking about as you're putting your business in place. That is where I start everybody, because even businesses who are accidentally successful at the start, maybe they get a couple great clients out the gate because they happen to know the right person. There does come a point where if you don't have those foundations in place, it will come to bite you in the butt. So I still have people who already hit some great milestones and they still go back through that checklist because they realize, oh yeah, I need to make sure I have these things in place so I have a solid foundation to move from.